All right, everybody, we're going to talk about analysis. I want to look at two different handouts or two different sheets I put together on analysis and use that as a basis to introduce this as a major concept in this unit. We're going to be talking about three major points of writing analytics. And is just the word analysis itself, the other is synthesis, and the other is comparison and contrast. Now, I know we've had exposure to these at some level, and I'm not here to just repeat what we know, but to extend. And so that's what we want to do. So give me a little bit of room there as we look at that, and let's go ahead and share screen and talk through some of these concepts. Some of this we've seen already. So analysis in the first unit we talked about as being an ability to break a subject matter or idea into parts. And the reason you want to break it down is so that you can see everything. So the analogy I sometimes use is a backyard garage mechanic, if you will, wanting to take apart an engine to be able to look at its components and be able to see it. So oftentimes when my father-in-law would do work on a transmission, for example, he would lay out a tarp and lay out the pieces so he can clearly see all the pieces. And you think of a diagram for instructions, lets you see everything, right? Your parts list is the very first thing you see when you do instructions because you need to see all the things needed or all the parts. Make sure you've got the parts for to be able to put it back together. And that's really what analysis does in some ways. It gives us the ability to see things and then put it back together in a way that's meaningful. So again, why? To see meaningful patterns of relationship, and these techniques are the way we can do it. So we want to observe and detail a subject by bias, by background, and by connotation. Connotation's a fancy word versus denotation or denotation, which means denotation is to define, connotation means to give context or to understand something by how it's analogous to something else. So we might think of metaphors and figures of speech and analogies as aspects of connotation. And denotation is simply, what is it? And these are two different functions of rhetoric too. Oftentimes to establish an argument, you have to say, what is it? Before you can go to connotation, which is what is the context? And sometimes the context defines, right, what is going on. So it can be both and. All right, so we need to observe it. We need to look at different aspects of it. Now, this doesn't always make sense. You're saying, wait a second, we're going to observe in detail a non-human. I'll talk about that in the next unit, an object or an idea. But let's just stay right here, which is look at the bias, the background, and the connotations. All right, we've talked already about this. I don't need to kind of rehash the hash. I'm just going to hit them very quickly. So grab analysis is an excellent acronym to help you be able to look over a text very quickly. There are two things I'm going to give you today that are great tools, and this is one of them. Again, reinforcing, so we're going to hit this quickly. What is a gap? What should have been there, but it's not there? And why didn't they cite it? What's repeating, which means what? Emphasis, 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 because as I repeat a word, we're kind of saying this is important, right? I'm trying to say this is important. So repetitions are a way of kind of highlighting for us as readers to understand the author wanted us to really get that. Anomalies are oddball things. They're weird. They're not really fitting. So, for example, an author citing an example that just seems a little strange, it doesn't fit. And then binaries are oppositions. So tensions, things held in tension. All right. So this is overall analysis. And that's really important to have in your hopper. The main tool here is again grab, gaps, repetitions, anomalies, and binaries. And fancy words, yes, but you're looking for ways to see the patterns. The second way we're doing this, of course, is using this technique in here. And let's go ahead and kind of look at that real quick. So rhetorical analysis, as you've seen and you read in the handout, is really ultimately, this is our second tool here, is answering the question, who is writing what to whom and for what purpose? And so the who involves the bias, the credentials, and the background of the author. The what involves not only the writing, but the sources and the argument. And the whom involves, of course, the audience, but thinking primary and secondary audiences. Last but not least, the purpose. What does the author want us to walk away thinking? And so when we look at this article that we had the other day that I think is going to be helpful for us to look at again as I'm racing the clock here because I have my battery. I don't have this computer plugged in, but heck, it's going to work out for you guys. All right. Right or left, we must open our minds again. Bloomberg News. Who's Bloomberg News? A little left of center, but associated with Michael Bloomberg, but not run by him. It's not his blog. It's an actual site online for news, similar to news organizations like New York Times and Wall Street Journal. Um, Interesting the way that they're trying to use terminology. Some of us, especially on the right, aren't just open to evidence, but liberals among us have no reason to be smug. So very interesting clientele they have. A lot of business folk really follow Bloomberg. So look at the word us there, trying to frame it. Andreas Kluth, just to get a little more background German, and maybe coming at it because of that with a little bit different stance than, say, an American would on their own. We talked about the importance of when we're doing analysis, and now, of course, looking at his sources and looking at his argument. But now the last gift, I want to give you three things: grab analysis, who is writing what to whom and for what purpose. And the last thing, I'll add a third, is this idea that we talked about the other day, which is to always ask, what do I have to assume in order to go with this claim? So when we look at this claim, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? It sounds snappy, it's a great opening, and we're all in, right? Of course, we want to be open to possibility and to facts and the idea of change, and that's all good because we almost know these words. They reverberate in our culture as positive words. And so he says that's a definition, a working definition of open-mindedness. I like the idea of working because he's qualifying. I mean, he gives us a little sense that he can slip and work with it different ways. But one of the things we talked about in class was this idea of facts. That sometimes you need to challenge the idea of even the precis, the premise, the words, if you will, that are used to build the argument. We got to go back to kind of say, hey, wait a second. So in this case, what do I have to assume to go with the claim? I have to assume there are enough facts that we agree on what a fact is, right? And that it's contextual, meaning that the fact applies into the situation. I think all those would be important things to kind of challenge to say, I can go with this phrase. I can go with this claim that open-mindedness is the ability to change with facts. So I just want to encourage you as you go through all the articles we have for this unit and all your work in college to constantly ask those three questions and use those techniques: gaps, repetitions, anomalies, binaries, rhetorical analysis, who is writing what to whom and for what purpose, especially kind of unearthing bias without trying to say, oh, that flips the piece. Oh, just because they are German or they're left of center, they can't be worth anything. No, wait, work it right. Look at the sources in the argument. And then the last, of course, asking, what are the assumptions? What do I have to assume in order to go with that claim? All right, guys, take care. I think we made it.